7 o'clock on my watch now, so we'll call this work session to order and get started here. Mr. Frank's going to do some introductions and we'll get rolling on this. Thanks everybody for coming.
I'd like to welcome everybody. It's great to see the full Intermediate Cafe space of Washington residents. I mean, I think that's something that we all should be proud of, that we do live in a community with so many interested in what we're doing here at Washington Community Schools and helping the school board here shape the direction that we want to go, in the immediate future, the next 2 to 3 years, but also kind of think long term, the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. What do we want Washington Community Schools to look like? I see a lot of the members from the Community Facility Committee that gave us their time and energy back in January, February, and March. Thank you again for being here. A lot of what came out of that has driven the discussions and the conversations this summer. As we go tonight, a couple things that I want you to think about that as we look at some of these scenarios and these construction options. First thing I would say is, this is real high level overview right now. Their Performance Services brought some handouts for you to see, and you're going to see some floor plans and some concepts and some possible additions. I wouldn't get too hung up on if you're looking at that and thinking, I don't know if that's going to fit at that spot. This is just an idea right now, just high level concepts. And, there's a lot of different ways, probably an addition or a new building can look. And so just keep that in mind. And the other thing that I would ask for you is a couple things that the school board and myself, my administrator team, I think some of the teachers would feel is we are at capacity in basically all of our buildings. I can give 3 examples from this summer where we've had to get creative to create space. We did some work up at the high school where we basically absorbed a library storage room. I don't see Mrs. Harmon here. She wasn't too happy about it, but we took her space and to expand our English learner space. Over at Washington Primary, Mrs. Harmon's not probably a fan of mine this summer. We built a wall in the library so that we could have a library space, and then we created a primary STEM space. Mrs. Murphy also got creative and saw an opportunity to take a larger classroom that had a natural built divider in it, for us to divide that room to create 2 spaces to create another general ed classroom. In this building, again, we built a wall to divide a larger classroom to create a space for a new special ed program, and then another space that we already had a program for, and already me and Mr. Cherry's thinking about next year and what that's going to look like. We've got a very large 1st grade over at primary. We have a very large 3rd grade this year. So next year in this building, we'll have 2 of the largest groups of students in the whole school district in this building. 200 plus, that'll be 2nd and 4th. We're going to have to get creative again and make do with what we have for that year. The other thing would be we serve a diverse population. In Washington Community Schools, we have a population of about 30% students that are identified as special education. So what that means is we have programs where we serve those students in ways beyond just the general classroom. We have special ed teachers that work in what we call resource rooms, and where the pinch happens sometimes is we need a resource room so that we meet our obligations by federal law, and we need different types of spaces that 30, 40, 50 years ago just wasn't a thing. We also serve a growing English learner population, and those kids need special instruction too, and we need special spaces for them. The final thing that I would I guess there's 2 more things. The next thing that I would talk to you about is we need to look at how are we keeping up and modernizing our buildings for what education should be today. And, I think Mr. Cherry talked about it during the regular board meeting. Something that I'm very proud of as the superintendent here at Washington is, I think we do a really good job with STEM instruction: science, technology, engineering, and math. Up at the high school, we've got Mr. Riney that's here tonight, teaches computer science and robotics. We have a growing robotics program that is opening doors for our students like you would not believe. We're making connections with a lot of the contractors up at Westgate and Crane Naval Base. And when I'm sitting in meetings with those folks, they're telling me about how they're going to be needing hundreds of jobs in the next 5 to 10 years, and they don't know where they're going to get the workers from. I think we can help our kids know that you can have modern, futuristic jobs working in the tech industry, engineering, and those sorts of things right in your backyard. And that's why we make STEM such a big focus. And even if they're not going to go into STEM as a career, there's so many other things that are valuable that come out of STEM, from the problem-solving skills to the collaboration, the communication. There's so many things that come out of that just aren't math and science that benefit all of our kids. The career pathways. I don't know if you pay attention in the news, but Indiana is considering doing a revamp of the high school diploma that would impact this year's 8th grade students. And really a big piece of that, and there's nothing that's settled yet. And if you read the news this morning, they came out with a new version of it yesterday. And from what I'm reading, IU and Purdue are happy with this version. But a big piece, and the business leaders in the state are driving some of this, is they want to see kids in high schools get more work-based experience. And so, up at our high school, we have the computer science room where they're learning about computer science and programming and those sorts of things. And we have kids. I can speak as a dad. My son was an engineer intern up at one of the Westgate contractors, and it was because of what he learned in computer science at Washington High School. The biomed program up at the high school. We're building connections with the hospital and other medical type companies that are helping kids go into the medical field. That's just where we're looking at how do we continue to be innovative and to help prepare our kids to give them all sorts of career opportunities and pathways. The final thing as we look at this that I know is on the minds of the school board members and is going to be a difficult decision for us to make, but we do have to come to some sort of decision here on what is the future of Veal Elementary. Is it going to remain as a K-4? Can we afford to keep it as a K-4? Will the enrollment in the Veal district produce a need for it to be a K-4? Or are there other purposes of Veal Elementary? As you go through and you see some of the scenarios, you're going to see Veal repurposed, and that's what that means. It's something that we need to come to some sort of decision on and make as part of our long-term plan. The one handout you're going to see is with the different scenarios. And I asked Jerry, the architect, let's include all of those because I want folks to see we're brainstorming and we're trying to think of all the different ways that we can do this. Now, in his presentation, there's not enough time tonight to go through every single one, but if there is one that you're wondering, why didn't they pick that one for the presentation, we are going to have a public comment opportunity here. And you'll have a time to ask about a certain one that you think looks better than the other. So at this time, I'm going to turn this over to our architect, Jerry, who's going to lead us. He told me he drove down from Green Bay, Wisconsin, so he's ready to lead us in this presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Frank. Good evening, everyone. Again, I'm Jerry Rolfson. I'm the Director of Architecture for Performance Services. I'm not from Green Bay, Wisconsin, but I did have an appointment in Green Bay yesterday. Last night, I was actually at a school district there that our company has a project with, and we had a board tour, and it's a multi-phase project, but a piece of it's opening for the school year this year, so I was up there, and so I finished that up last night, got up this morning, we talked about the presentation, I got to the road, and here I am. So I'm happy to be here, and I'm not the only one from Performance Services here. We actually have a good portion of our team here. Ryan Benson, senior architect, Marianne McMahon is a former educator and assistant superintendent of schools. She is an educational planner for us and helped us with some of our programming analysis for the district. And I have Paul Thoman, who's a lead engineer for us, and Neil Pluck, who's also a lead engineer for our company. So we have spent a considerable amount of time doing programming analysis and facilities analysis, looking at buildings and needs and talking with the district, and obviously working on different scenarios for consideration here. I'd like to just share with how we're going to structure this tonight. I'll continue the introduction that Mr. Frank started a little bit, just by turning back the timeline a little bit and just reminding where we started. And in fact, that might be a good place. Oh, well, stay on that slide. We'll start with an orientation, then we'll go through a scenarios review, and then we'll talk about some high-level facility budgets, because as we started looking at different scenarios, then if you look at those in a vacuum and you don't have any kind of scale of magnitude cost information to frame the information that you're preparing, then it's hard really to provide evaluation. So Mr. Frank and the administration and board asked us to do some cost analysis, not holistic. It's not every building in every scenario, but it's selected ones. And I'll explain that a little bit further when we get into the budget portion of it. And then once we finish that, we'll open up for questions from everyone. We can have discussion about the different scenarios, and we'd love to hear feedback. So, okay, so as we get started, you can advance as we get started, just kind of a reminder, back in January through April, I think it was, January through April, the district engaged Mr. Jim Halleck, who organized some community sessions and some community brainstorming that really serves as the foundation for what we're looking at here tonight. So that data was used as a feedback. In fact, I'll share some of the highlights of that here in just a second. At the same time, PSI was engaged in looking at facilities. I mentioned that facilities, programming facilities in terms of their condition of equipment and condition of building envelope and those types of things, physical conditions of the facilities. So both a programming analysis and a physical condition analysis, we were doing that in parallel. That actually fed into a part of the community presentations. We were one of those sessions if you participated in those. And then ultimately, then you had a big idea, kind of a brainstorming session with those community groups. And from those community groups, there were some common denominators, some key areas that were highlighted, and this is actually on this district's website. But 5 things kind of rose, or 4 things rose to the top. School safety, of course, school safety and security. A desire for some curb appeal from facilities. You have some aging facilities, a lot of variety of ages. Some of your facilities date back to the 50s, I think it's 50s, yeah, 50s as the earliest portions of those. So you have a variety of conditions, and it's just a desire to really address the public with your facilities. The need, as Mr. Frank mentioned, the need for additional classroom space because you're near capacity or even over capacity in some of your facilities based on your target classroom sizes that you'd like to have. You're at or over your capacity. And then to look at the grade realignment of the school district. And so those 4 elements really fed into the data that we're going to look at tonight. And so with that, we started working then after, it was probably during the summer, started looking at then with the administration and members of the board, how do we develop an approach to facilities for the district? And so So we really started discussing what's a long-term facility approach and what is a long-term facilities vision for the district. And you see that's kind of the title there at the bottom of the slide. It's really what we wanted to do is establish what is that vision to help guide analysis of scenarios that were created in terms of combinations of things you could do with facilities. Okay, so you can go over to the next slide. And so that really led to a couple of statements here that we put out there for consideration in the district. An approach would be to ultimately step towards a two-campus district. And that two-campus district could mean a variety of different things, but it would ultimately could be a configuration of preschool to 5th grade and a 6th through 12th grade configuration, or a preschool through 6th grade and a 7th through 12th grade configuration, or perhaps an elementary and a middle school, so in pre-K through 8 campus and then a 9 through 12 campus. So 2 locations essentially. And so when I think of 2 locations, and what we thought of as a group was it could be the upper elementary site combined with the high school as a campus location. And there's property that the school district owns, so ultimately there could be a new facility developed, and it's adjacent to the primary school, so that could be a quote campus. So it could be multiple buildings as a part of that campus, or it could be a single building. That's yet to be determined. That's kind of what we're trying to figure out as a community, is what's the best long-term direction to go. And as we look at this, I think that a key to this is we don't think all this is going to happen all at once. What we're trying to do is step towards that as a direction and try to get the puzzle pieces to fit. So think about that as we start to explore scenarios tonight. And then one of the other key tenets, and this goes along with grade realignment and some discussions, is a desire to establish facilities with no less than 3 grades in a facility. And the reason for that one is there are studies out that show that students perform better if they have a longer period of time in a facility, and that's because the staff that supports and leads those students has more time with them to analyze them, and that consistency is good for the students in terms of their learning. And so ultimately, there's a desire to try to head that way with your school facilities. It might not be feasible to do it completely to begin with, but looking at things that would head you in that direction ultimately. And this could be a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan, a 20-year plan, a 30-year plan. So there's no preconceived kind of idea of how quickly that would take place, but trying to put the puzzle pieces in order so that this board sets the table for future boards and the community for that development. Okay, is there anything, Mr. Frank, anything else that I missed along with that you would want to add? Okay, so with that said, let's go ahead and kind of dive right into the scenarios, and I'm going to ask my team if there's something that I leave out or something you think is important. I'll certainly can hand off the mic to make sure that we get 6 scenarios. 6. Did I say 5?
No, it's not all.
Okay. Yes, and we have, okay, so yes, so of the scenarios, we do have handouts. So we've got a graphic concept plan that puts all the facilities in a scenario on a page, and there's 6 of those. Those are the 6 that we're going to focus on in the PowerPoint tonight. But you'll see that your written description has 12. So we've actually explored 12. We wanted to pare it down for all the reasons that Mr. Frank already mentioned. There's a lot there, and there are certain ones that we kind of feel like as a group to start with seem to suit those tenets that I had mentioned at the beginning a little better than the others. So that's the reason for sharing those. The first one I'll look at here, and I'm going to cheat by looking at the screen as we kind of get through this to refresh my memory. The first one, scenario 1A, and title for one. Yes, so 1A is establishing, we titled these to try to create some organization when we look at them. And so this is really looking at a secondary campus solution. And there perhaps could be other ones too in our groupings that might fit the bill here, but this was the first one we started with. And what that would do, I'll just kind of explain to you, you can follow along the configuration of the buildings. And so with this one, you can see the subtitle 1A says requires additions in primary and intermediate, and I'll get to that here in just a second. The junior and senior high school would become a high school only for grades 9 through 12. And then the upper elementary school would become a middle school, grades 7 and 8. So that's that high school secondary campus component of it. The intermediate school would become grades 4 through 6, so still 3 grades in that facility. The primary school would become preschool through 3rd grade instead of preschool through 1 that it currently is. And then Beal would be repurposed, or as we've talked, Beal could be a location for preschool perhaps, and so we've always kind of left that in there. That's the be determined. And so to understand then what would we need to do in order to fit that, if you look at your plans and if we highlight these, if you can zoom in on the facilities, right, if we go in there for this. Let's just take a look at we'll go from the bottom up and look at the primary school. And the primary school then, by adding the 2 additional grades, would require a substantial addition in order to accommodate those additional classrooms. And one thing that, as we looked at these, I should mention that we did a programming analysis in the way of looking at what would a pre-K through 3 building look like if you built it from ground up, so we could understand all the spaces that would be required in a facility. We used that then as our model to overlay onto this building to make sure we accommodated all the program areas. And so as we did our analysis, we did that analysis through 3rd grade, we did that analysis for 5th and 6th grade, we did it for 7th and 8th grade, and we even did it for a component of the high school. So that's how we identified programming needs based on our programming discussions we had with the district and looking at your existing programming and programming desires. And that establishes a basis for numbers of spaces to fit all of your programs. Okay, so with that said, then the blue always represents building additions, and the yellow represents reconfigured areas of the building. Doesn't necessarily mean there wouldn't be other work within the building, but those areas are areas that would be reconfigured to some degree. With this particular scheme, you can see there's a substantial addition for grade level classrooms. What we're suggesting that if you do that, then perhaps you establish a new front door to the building in an area where you can have more suitable parking towards the south end of the building, and then there's a section of the building there in the center near the courtyard and adjacent to the gym that we're suggesting be rebuilt because there are some issues with the roof leaks, some HVAC concerns in that part of the building. And so it's not in every one of our schemes for the primary school, but in this particular one, we're suggesting that be rebuilt. And so that's why you have some blue shading in that portion of the building. And then it's a numbers game, really. We looked at an average when we looked at our programming based on the model numbers of students that you have in your demographic study, potentially as maximums, that we would look at, and based on your target numbers of students per classroom, which at the kindergarten through 2nd grade level is 20. And so it's 20 students. So 20 is the target maximum in a classroom. So what we did is we looked at that demographic study and said, okay, 200 is a out your maximum size that's kind of going through the district. And so 10 becomes the number of classrooms that you need for kindergarten through second grade. And that has been applied to all the options. And that's what we've done in this facility to determine how much space was needed. And then in order to support the additional students, one of the things that we would need to do is we would need to look at the cafeteria and how students are rotated through that. That's why you see that the music room on the stage has been taken away. We're expanding seating actually in the cafeteria and then rebuilding the music in a different location to facilitate that program use and need. Okay, so let's move on to the next piece. At the intermediate school level, then that's grades 4 through 6, and this configuration for the building is intermediate schools. It already has 3 grade levels, and it is at or slightly above capacity currently. But as you move up in age level in the district, the numbers of students per grade or per classroom, actually the target number increases a little bit. So for third grade, fourth grade is 25. For fourth grade is 25, and so we've applied for 4th, 5th, and 6th graders that change. It actually helps the capacity of that building a little bit. So 4th through 6th grade in the intermediate school helps that capacity and reduces some of your issues. But we also, at the same time, are looking at trying to cure some of the things, much like the primary school. And the cafeteria is another one of those issues where you could benefit from having more cafeteria seating. So displacing music, you can see in addition, and then perhaps we address your STEAM program as an addition along with that music program. Okay, so we've gone through grades pre-K through 6. Let's take a look at the upper. So in this scenario then, the upper elementary gets converted to a middle school, becomes a grade 7A middle school. And in this particular case, you could, purely you could fit the students into the building. But the wild card always when you get to the middle school and high school level is you have a lot of other supporting elective type programs. So you have your exploratories. And so that building, in this scenario, it might be a little struggle without an addition to be able to accommodate all the exploratory subjects you'd like to have to support the middle school. The good thing about upper elementary school being a middle school and adjacent to the high school is you still can facilitate stationary fairly easily because of the proximity of those buildings. And then one of the drawbacks for upper elementary school is it does happen to actually sit adjacent to a floodplain, so it limits your ability to expand, and that's why you don't see any substantial additions on any of the options for that building. You're very limited. You're pigeonholed really between the football field and the football field track complex and that floodplain, and so it limits where you can actually build, and about the only place you could expand is in that blue box zone there, kind of parallel to the existing classroom wing. And that perhaps could be an opportunity for additional program space. Okay, and then the last component of this particular scenario then is the junior and senior high school. And in this particular one, what we're suggesting is that you consolidate and create a new front door basically at the junior high school side and have a consolidated student services and administration for both buildings, so you could have one single front door, and then that perhaps would free up some space by moving administration to that side for swapping some program space. So it doesn't really address a lot of the program needs that the high school has. It's really more about addressing some of your safety security components and a consolidated front door. And that is that the existing administrative suite could become an opportunity for a little bit more programming space. Okay, so I'll keep moving through these, and then we'll take questions about scenarios as we wrap up here. Okay, so scenario 2A. Okay, so this one takes the idea of perhaps you could transition the intermediate school as a middle school facility. And if you look at the intermediate school, it actually has some amenities that would be good to support a middle school program. Here, there are tennis courts and there's a track outside. So we have a lot of that, what I would call physical education and athletic support. Plus, you're able to the district's athletic support fields at this location as well. So, so we did that overlay. We wanted to see what that would look like. And then maybe since I mentioned that first, let's look at that. Let's look at the intermediate schools as our starting point. And I think for this building, it could support, actually it could support the middle school program fairly nicely. The core classrooms lay in fairly nicely, and you could develop a band choir space and some elective support or exploratory support space as a small addition on the building. So, and it does have some of the same other renovation components to it that the prior scenario had in the way of expanding food seating in the cafeteria area. So that would be grades 6 through 8 at this facility. Let's look at the primary school. Primary school is virtually identical to the previous building, so it's a pre-K 3 building, and all the addition and renovation components are actually the same on that one, so I don't need to review that one. The upper elementary school would become grades 4, 5, and in an effort, and they would fit, you're retaining 2 grades in that building, in an effort to eliminate the portables, then what we would suggest potentially is to take the auditorium component that is in that building and renovate that. It's underutilized currently, that space is. Renovate that for additional classroom space so that you could accommodate all program needs for those grade levels. Correct. And Ryan was mentioning to me, there's a note on the plan. You'll see that there's a secure entry component in each of these. We would make sure that we are addressing your secure entrances. So there's a solution there for every one of the buildings, somehow. And as we looked at it, we think there's a way that you could actually connect your front door to the reception area and close that zone so you don't have visitors just walking into the building without actually being trapped into a secure reception and vestibule area. So the high school, this one again, this becomes a high school only, grades 9 through 12, and the solution here is the same as the prior. Okay, so the next one we're going to look at is scenario 3D. 3D on your handout in terms of the written descriptions, and it's the third sheet then in your graphics. And so these are new. The scenario 3s are all new building solutions. We chose to look at this one, and what the new building solution here is, it would be building a new intermediate school. So it'd be a grade 5 and 6 intermediate school on new property that the district owns. Then what would happen with the existing facilities? So let's go from the primary school, we're just going to work our way around from the primary around. Yeah, so the primary school would become grades 3 and 4 only. And by reducing a grade level in that building, it fits fairly well. And the intermediate school becomes grades pre-K2. And again, the way the configuration of that building is reducing one grade level and just accommodating preschool, it actually helps relieve some of the capacity issues, so no additions are planned in this scenario for that building. The upper elementary would become a 7-8 middle school, and we looked at this one previously as well in a prior scenario, and so the same concerns we would have with this one, but in theory it does fit. And then the high school, in this particular scenario, can you zoom in on that one a little bit more?
So this is building new building. Maybe it's the same shape as it is now.
It's the actual new building is not represented.
Oh, okay, I was like, it looks the same.
Great question.
Okay.
Three D is a dot.
Picture you're on, the one that says 3D. I have a question on 3D. When you say intermediate becomes pre-K to 2, and you have the grades on there, there is no kindergarten classrooms. You have first and second grade.
Well,
Sorry.
that's a major problem. Yeah, so
Sorry.
no, that's not sorry. That's a sorry from our end. That one escaped us when we did our analysis. And I know,
You didn't
I
do
know,
very many, so I can't
I
understand
know,
why.
well, I know exactly why. This was the one scenario that we did not have graphics for initially. Actually, we had it written out. And then as we were preparing for tonight, we decided, we realized we didn't have the graphics, so we were stealing from other solutions. So it didn't get the vetting that the other ones did. So I apologize for that, but very good catch. I appreciate, I'm guessing there's educators in the room here that actually tonight. So clearly, pre-K through 2 would require an addition at the intermediate school to accommodate kindergarten, because you don't have, and you'll see there's some others, and actually, probably in your sheet, there's some other scenarios that actually show some wings on the intermediate school. It is feasible to expand that building fairly easily. There's a lot of property there. So perhaps we have that somewhere.
3C's got it there.
3C.
3C intermediate's got
You,
what
can you flip over, let's go. Ryan's gonna jump out of the PowerPoint for a second, and we'll actually show you that solution.
You don't have this.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is not exactly the same grade configuration, but the concept would be where, you can see that building addition is where we would plan on putting additional space. So what I would anticipate is kindergarten classes would likely be in one of the existing wings, and that we would rotate the grade levels around and actually have an addition extending off of where that exit portal currently exists. Have to do some relocation of playground space in order to accommodate that. Okay, can you go back to the PowerPoint? Apologize for that lost grade level in that scenario. Okay, so we were on the high school. Let's go to the high school building for 3D. So at the high school, then, in this particular scenario, in this particular solution, it would be much like the other one. There'd be a unified entrance to the high school and very little reconstruction really needed because of that. Move on to the next one.
One thing that I, from working with these guys on this, like when you would look at 3D, the idea there would also be if you're doing a new building, obviously it starts out as a 5-6 on that plan. But down the road, the idea would be either your 7-8 can move out there as well, whether that's 20 years from now or wherever it may be, or you can build a new K through 3 or pre-K through 3 out there and move towards that 2 campus scenario. So some of these things as you look at, I mean, it's hard when we've talked about this for as long as we have to make sure we communicate that there's a next step to a lot of these plans that would make more sense why we would move that direction if that was something we decided we wanted to do.
But yes, that's absolutely true. That again, it's a step that we're taking a stepped approach. And so some of these facilities could be, for instance, 5, 6, 7, 8 long term, or it could be a pre-K through 6 building long term. It just depends on what is determined to be the best long-term combinations. And not all the decisions actually even need to be made at the start. You just have to set the table so you can make those decisions down the road and determine what that best configuration would be. Okay, so the next set of scenarios we're going to look at is for scenario 4, which is improve and expand the current 7 through 12 campus. So it would be your senior high school. And for B, okay, so in this scenario, this one has an addition and a renovation at the high school and a renovation of upper. So okay, this solution actually is the only combination that we've developed to date that achieves the 3 grade levels per building as a target. So keep that in mind as you're looking at this one. And so I'll start like we've been doing with the primary schools so we can share that. And this solution, very similar to what we looked at with prior solutions for the primary school, with adding grade levels 2 and 3 to the building. But in this particular case, preschool is not located here, so it's taken that component out. That's the only adjustment to the facility. And I'll share where preschool goes here in just a second. Then at the intermediate school, that becomes grades 4 through 6, and I believe we've looked at this one as well in the past, so you can see a small addition needed for that. Okay. And the upper elementary school would actually be repurposed into potentially a central office and a preschool center. So we know we've got, I don't have the program overlaid in it, but there's a lot of square footage here that we can actually make use of for those programs. And so that would mean the current central office then would be sold or repurposed. And you'd be focused then with administration being adjacent to your high school, Yeah, Ryan mentions a good point there. The auditorium can actually facilitate public meetings very well. So, for instance, this meeting here tonight could be held in that type of a space. You have a little better presentation type space. Okay, so then what happens at the senior high school building? In this particular solution, we're looking at trying to consolidate the front door so that you have a more recognizable front door for both the junior and the senior high school. So we're moving the high school to the junior high school side, but we're not consolidating them into a single office. We're actually creating separate administrative blocks, but sharing the same front door. And so that's the reason for the addition. And then we're really looking forward at and saying, hey, how do we address the kind of inboard cafeteria, kitchen, deliveries, congestion issue that you have at the high school? Potentially down the road, there could be an addition for a cafeteria and kitchen that is outboard in the building and facilitates deliveries in a better way. So to do that, I don't have the site plan to share with you today. We could maybe dig it up if we have time in between or during the question and answer session. But in order to expand towards, that is the west, is that right? West, expand towards the west. You would have to actually, is it 6th Street? 6th Street. You would actually have to look at and work with the city on closing 6th Street to do that, to get enough square footage there that you can actually make use of. And so you already have have negotiated out being able to close that street for bus loading and unloading. So it would just be a matter of, hey, that right of way would be vacated, and then that property then could be utilized for expansion purposes. So no guarantees there. It's hypothetical. None of that legwork has been done yet, but it's something to consider. Okay, so let's move on to the next one. So scenario 5A, and scenario 5A is, you can see they're still under the expand the current high school campus, here senior high school campus solution, but because it is supported by that. These were kind of the last couple of scenarios that we developed, so they got renumbered as 5, but they probably could have been 4D and 4E. So in this particular scenario,
I'll say the same issue.
Let's just skip this one. Just go to 5. This one.
that was the right.
Yeah.
We're gonna skip 5A. Those graphics are not right. Okay, 5B. Okay, yes, this one is correct. Okay, so 5B, the high school remains a 7 through 12 facility, but there is an addition plan for it. The upper elementary school remains grades 5 and 6. The intermediate school becomes grades 3 and 4. The primary becomes grades pre-K through 2, so we're reducing one of the grade levels that we plan there. And then the ELC, the repurpose for preschool, one of the 2. So let's look at the primary school. So what's the difference here? We're taking away one of the grades, and you can see I still ghosted in the third grade, this is really the same plan as before, minus third grade level classrooms. But the same concept in terms of the renovations. And in this particular scenario, I'm showing that the portion of the building that we were removing before, that has some of the issues, that it is not being removed, but that it is just renovated to accommodate some of those, or to repair some of those problems that exist in that part of the building. So a reduced addition, and set the table for maybe a future addition for third grade if you need to down the road. Okay. The intermediate school becomes grades 3 and 4, and because you're taking a grade out of that building, then things lay in better for that facility. You do not need to provide any addition. The upper elementary school remains grades 5 and 6, and here we're suggesting, as one of the other schemes, that you remove the portables and you renovate the auditorium so that you can house all those programs within the building. And then at the high school, then, in this particular solution, what we're suggesting then is that the old original gymnasium that supports the junior high school currently be removed, and that a substantial addition be provided to replace that space as a multi-purpose space that would support a lot of different functions, including things like STEAM and innovation, so STEM and innovation space, could be robotics, so exploratory functions, and as well, then provides kind of a new access component then for your kitchen and cafeteria. And then you'd also at the same time be providing a new front door in that component that would serve both the junior high school and the high school, but with a separated administration. So we looked at the square footage needs for that. The shape of that is the right square footage. The form of it could change. So that's just a hypothetical amount of square footage that you would need to accommodate. Yes, correct, yes. And the size of the multi-purpose, the program that we established for that is, it would be a minimum of 2 basketball courts, so that you could truly have a multi-purpose space out of it.
Say that again. What did you say?
So the multi-purpose space that would be developed would be a minimum of 2 basketball courts, so that you could facilitate multiple things happening at the same time with the gymnasium.
What 2 basketball? Okay.
Okay. Okay, I think that runs through each of the different scenarios that we've looked at. The next piece I want to talk about is facility budget. So we did some high-level budgeting because we wanted to frame understanding what would be the investment for new facilities, for facilities that had substantial additions. So we get an understanding of how does that compare against the debt that's falling off and what might be achievable with that debt falling off, and also just to be able to frame what you're looking at for an investment in these facilities. Well, the way we looked at this is we don't have a design, right? This is all hypothetical. But we do have program information. I have a separate series of actually 4 or 5 different program summaries that outline all the spaces that would be needed for a new facility, for that 7-8 facility, 5-6 facility, pre-K through 3 facility, and a 5 through 8 facility. I think those are the ones that we're going to see the budget information here in a second. Plus the substantial additions that we were talking about. So the substantial addition is a pre-K 3 at Washington. Substantial addition is a pre-K 2 at Washington. And then the last one that we analyzed was the multi-purpose addition, because there was a substantial amount of square footage for the junior and senior high school, what that investment potentially would be. And so for the basis of this, we have an ongoing construction, Board of Services does have an ongoing construction project of the Avon Community Schools. We're building a new middle school there. So what we did is we took the data from that, and it's a new facility on a green site. So we had to do full development on it. I extracted out the data from that, and then we inflated it to $2025 in order to get a basis for cost. So it's not based on any real design that is specific for Washington Community Schools. It's just based on historical data that we had on file for a building that we're developing. And that will give us a sense then for about what the square foot cost, total investment would be for a new building or those substantial additions for these scenarios, or at least a component of these scenarios. We didn't look at all building improvement needs for each scenario, but just did selected large-scale improvements. So if you looked at, for instance, scenario 1A, we only really got a component of that in terms of our estimate. We didn't look at all the facilities yet. The reason for that is we really want to get a sense for what are determined the most feasible configurations in the district for analysis before we start doing full scale analysis on cost across all buildings. So we'd like to be able to narrow it down to say 2 or 3 or 4 different scenarios where we're really doing wholesale cost analysis across them. So that'll come down the road where we'll actually be looking at your facilities more directly to have a better gauge for what your investment in facilities would need to be. So again, high scale cost analysis based on historical data for another facility. So no real designs have been created here yet to be able to do analysis on. So with that said, let's take a look at those costs. And I'm going to start with the addition and renovation pieces here. And again, these were based on square footages that were developed on a separate programming document that we have, and I've shared with the administration. The first one is taking a pre-K building, pre-K through 1 building, and developing it into a pre-K through 3 building. And so that would end up being an 800 students plus 2 preschool classrooms building. And this was represented in scenarios 1A, 2A, and 3A. And we think the total building additions investment would be in about the $23 million range. Building renovations assumes that we would go in and renovate the entire facility. In other words, address all the HVAC concerns, bring the building up close to what I would call 0 age. You know, when it was like new, so we're going in, replacing ceilings, lighting, floor finishes, painting, perhaps equipment. So a full-scale renovation of the building. And then site work would be about $2.5 million, and that part of that would have to be replacing playgrounds. We'd be building over the area that playgrounds currently exist on, plus replacing parking lots and even expanding parking lots to comply with the city's ordinances for parking. Then number 2 there is a same location, pre-K, but it's a reduced edition. It's the pre-K through 2 primary school edition. You can see the building additions can be reduced, of course, because you're reducing the numbers of classrooms that you're having to build. The renovations would be about the same because you're impacting the existing building in about the same way. And then site work would scale down a little bit too as well because you're impacting the site to a smaller degree. Then at then the last one that we looked at was a addition renovation project would be what was the value potentially of that multi-purpose main entrance addition be for the high school. And about $18 million for the building additions, site work about $4.5 million. And then we looked at renovations of the existing administration to be moving it, and that could be renovated to academic space at about $1.5 million to convert that space to some other type of program. Okay, let's look at the next grouping. So 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 are all a variety of new facilities, ground up, green site, and again, broken down into building and site work costs. And so the first one is a new pre-K through 2 elementary, 600 students plus preschool. And that value for the whole building would be approximately the $55 million range. You can see how the site work and building costs are broken down there, 46 million versus 8 million. Pre-K 3 would step up a little bit. You've got 800 students in the building now, so you're adding another 10 classrooms, purely grade level classrooms, plus some of the support space. So that would bump that cost up a little bit to about 63 million. Then a 5-6 building, so that's again 400 students target in that facility. And that target value would be about 39 million. Then a 7-8 building, again, it's about 400 students, but with a middle school, you're going to have more program space to support your exploratory subjects. So you have greater programming, so you have more square footage to support that. So that's the reason for the increases in cost for that. The site work costs for the middle school assumes that you're going to use the existing athletic fields that are elsewhere, so no athletic fields, just simply the parking and drives to support that building. And then the 5-8 building, then that is a larger middle school facility, 800 students, you're doubling the numbers of students, and you can see the investment there could be in the order of $74 million, about 62 towards building and 11 for the site. So those are based on comparable new building that is being built elsewhere. You know, we would have to do specific estimating for a real project, obviously, if there were determinations on, you know, what configuration the district would actually move to. So that concludes the information that we have for tonight. I apologize for a couple of the graphical things that we have here that were out of alignment. I may try to look actually to see if we've got those on file. We can share those if needed after we get a question answered. I'll turn it back over to Kevin to start fielding questions.
I guess while y'all are absorbing all of that, I'll go ahead and make a few comments from where we've been, where we're at. When we left the last work session here, these guys came up with these scenarios. We started sorting through them, started picking out the ones we thought fit the needs of the community. And then we started looking for things that we felt like were affordable. Again, when they're talking about budgets, they're talking about pretty high level stuff. There's no plans. There's no, we know how many faucets we need in the building. We know how many ceiling tiles we need, anything like that. We're just looking to get from the community now. Hey, you've seen the different ways that we're proposing this to be done. What's the community appetite for this? You'll put a lot of time in this. One of the things we tried to focus on too was that every building would have a secure entrance. Even if like the upper doesn't get a lot done to it, we're going to get a secure entrance to that building, no matter what happens. There was a lot to deal with in looking at slides, and it's tough to tell from just these pictures and all, you know, anything specific, but it's just ideas. And one of the things I wanted to mention on that last thing with the high school, you know, the idea there is to get us a new front door to Washington High School. I think that was very important to everybody that was involved in those meetings. So you say, you're building a big building and a couple of gym floors, how does that help our programming? Well, part of that also also is our STEM space. The ROTC, robotics, band could use that. We could bring wrestling up to the high school. And we could use the space that's now administrative to fill other needs. So we are creating classroom space by doing that, because I know the immediate reaction is, oh, cool, they just want to build a gym. No, that's not what that would be. But we would have to do something with the gym floor, because we're getting rid of one of the oldest buildings in the school corporation doing that. And we were trying to look at this from another standpoint of operating costs, older buildings that are high cost per student, high cost per square foot, high maintenance. So that's just some of the things that we worked through to get to this point. There's no decision been made at all. We're here for your feedback. And anybody else on the board like to make some comments?
A question more than a comment. Like on your scenario 6, pre-K through 3 primary school existing facility, that amount, is that just for the primary school, or does that take care of all the different schools in that scenario?
I think you're talking about, those got renumbered at a certain point. You're not talking about 6. Go back a slide if you would, guys. I think you're either talking about 1 or 2.
Number 1. So that amount, is that just for the primary school? Or
That's correct, yes.
So it doesn't take into account all the other scenarios, all the other
Correct, that is. For a
renovation
single building,
additions?
yeah.
Thank you.
We need to do the microphone for it, so it picks it up.
So unrelated to the long-term plan, is there a short-term plan to address like the security issues and that kind of thing, or we're gonna need to wait several years to do that? Is there a short list for addressing any of the concerns sooner?
So short term, you're talking about what we might do in the next few years. We would like to do a project that addresses at least one of them right away. Like I mentioned, the upper elementary. If nothing else is done to that building and just doing the secure entrances thing, that's something we can look at maybe with our operations, with the geo bond, other ways that we can handle that. It is our goal to get safety taken care of as quickly as possible, but it's also within the guidelines of the money we have to spend. So I guess I would say, if you go with a scenario that does something at the primary with an addition, well, that's going to get taken care of right away. Intermediate's already got it taken care of. We would look at something with the upper. The high school becomes a different beast, basically. Do we try to do some sort of a renovation that combines the two, or do we wait and try and do a building project that would create a new entrance, whatever that would be, or do we wait and try and move the junior high out? There's a lot of different ways to look at it.
I guess, Scott, my main point is, like, I've got kids junior high school, you can come in any door of the building, and since we've talked about it, every day I worry about the security of that building and Uvalde and things happening like that. That's more my question, not the bigger picture, but like today, what can be done to make those buildings more secure? You don't have to answer that, I'm just saying that's my concern.
Right, and I will say, because I'm looking for him, Mr. Ashworth has tried to focus on that. He's got a lot of things to focus on as a new assistant principal. But he is working on that, working with our SRO. This was at our last actual board meeting, but we do have 2 more SROs in the school system now. That was one of the things that we were already working on, but obviously it was brought up during the meetings. So Colin is there at the high school full-time now to help with that situation. But yeah, there's a lot of gates to that building, and there's a lot of work to do. I know just from talking to Mr. Ashworth, students are not supposed to be going in and out of other doors anymore. If you leave and you want to come back in, you come through gate 6. So we're addressing it with the facilities we have, I guess would be the best way.
The thing is, in the long run, you can't do away with those doors because you can't have a building that size that only has one means of getting out when there's fire. There's still gonna be a door there no matter what.
Yeah, I was just wondering if you've looked at evidence of your funding yet. If anyone is, like, I go to some other meetings and you go to county commissioner meetings and they give tax abatements to these places, and now there's no money coming in on property taxes to the school system. I don't think very many people are aware of that. And the people that are out there paying the property taxes, mine alone went up $1,200 this year and went up $1,500 next year, they tell me already. You know, and we're giving tax abatements to people. Does anybody on the school board communicate with the county commissioners or the town council or the county council about how that affects school funding when we give tax abatements out?
I don't know that I'm not gonna honestly tell you that that's a direct conversation. I think it's something that, in indirect conversations, I know people in the county council, we have conversations about that, but as far as going to a meeting and standing up in front of them, I'll admit, no. I haven't done that. I don't know if anyone else has, but we're all aware of it. And yeah, you know, we talked with our finance people, Baker Tilly, and they tell us how those things affect us and that our assessed valuations are going up. But anytime a TIF district gets close to retirement, it gets reinstated. You know, abatements get extended as new expansions happen. And we need things like that to happen in the community, but you're exactly right. It keeps those things from helping with the available funds for the school. And I don't know if this was your question or not, but we do have, I think this was discussed when we did the other meetings, we do have bonds coming off that are available to us. That's why you'll see some of the scenarios you saw. A couple of these scenarios on here fit within our bonding capacity without any tax raise at all, just maintaining the tax rate that we have now. But there's just a couple of them. If you can figure that out pretty easily by looking at them. So, yeah, and this information comes from Baker Tilly, but as far as a tax rate that this school system charges as part of your property taxes, and I think we all understand that, but property tax bill that you get does not all come to the school. It supports county government and a lot of other things. But we are in the bottom 11% of tax rates in Indiana. Our tax rates, I don't like paying them any more than anybody else. I'm not going to try and tell you that, oh, that's cheap, we ought to be happy about it. But we are in a lower area. And another thing, when we look at our bonding capacity within our tax rate, is we appreciate that prior boards did a very good job of keeping our tax rate down. But when the state took and established the deal where if you want to raise the tax rate at all, you have to go through referendum process, we were locked into our current debt level. And when that debt load comes off, we can reinvest it, and we can use that. But, to give, yeah, but to give an example, talking with, other school board presidents, there's a lot of other districts are investing a lot more than we are. They can do a $49 million project and never affects the tax rate because that's already built into their tax rate. So we're in a box a little bit if you look at it that way, that, when that legislation went through, that set our cap, and that's where it stays unless we get referendum approved. Yes.
What is our current bond rate that's coming off? What is our bonding capacity?
Bonding capacity in the next 2 years, depending on where the bond interest rate would fall, would be somewhere between 25 and 27 million. And so that's the amount that we could bond and not impact property tax rates.
Second question, on the primary building, while we were brainstorming all these additions, have we looked closely to what's underground?
Not yet.
Last time when Baker Tilly was here, there was a discussion on, can you pair referendum money with your bonded money? I don't think they had a clear answer for that. So if you were to do a referendum on a project, you can't spread that money out for anything else, correct? Is that what they decided?
Yeah. So, to give you, they presented scenario 5B that would require these two amounts to do roughly, okay? So we could do one of these within our bonding capacity, but we can't decide to do both of them and do one and get a referendum for part of the other part. If that makes it, it can't be what would that be, a $47 million project. We're going to use our bonds for 27 and we're going to ask for 20. It would have to be that we're going to do scenario 2 or 3 with our bonding capacity, and then we're going to come to the community and ask for a referendum for the other amount. If that's what you're asking. I'm not trying to say that's what we're going to do. I'm just saying, I'm trying to give you a scenario.
Yeah, because, last time we thought that, or in the discussion, was that you could pair the money together. So,
Exactly.
and that's what we didn't know last time.
Exactly. So if we were looking at the other slide and it was a build this building for 55 million, I'll admit that that's what I thought. I think Randy said the same thing, some of the others, that we thought, okay, well, we just need a referendum for half of it, No, if you're going to build that building, you either have to ask a referendum for the whole thing, or it has to be 2 projects somehow.
Do you have a longer forecast out for beyond this money? So next available money for bonding comes up, is this our max bonding limit, like corporate wide, or can we pay this off before we can do more, or is there other bonds out there that term out by 10 years?
Yeah, it's a very good question. So it is our max bonding, except for a couple of geo bonds that we have out. We have a geo bond for Hatchet Hollow that was just done last year. We have one coming off now that it's a little under $1 million. We're looking at actually going ahead with that geo bond again to address some HVAC problems at a couple buildings and hopefully use it for some secure entrance as well. That's a tough balance, to pick which one of those is the highest priority. Is the highest priority the air your kid's breathing or the locks on the doors? That's tough. But to answer your question on that, yes, that would be our max amount. But Carrie can speak to this. As our assessed valuation rises, we would have the ability to potentially do more geo bonds and small projects. But as far as the next big project, it's either a referendum or it's 20-ish years from now when this bond set would be paid off.
We have in 2030, we have the 2008 reno of the junior senior high. That will be completely paid off in 2030. I can't speak in 2024 what that's gonna open us up for as far as bonding capacity. All we can hope for is that our AV continues to rise, as the AV raises, and we have more capacity. So, it's 25 right now until 2030, or until we get an increased AV, which is a double-edged sword because the property taxes go up because the AV went up, right? So,
Assuming increased property taxes, we would also increase cost of construction somewhat.
I would say that's.
So I'm going to shift gears just a little bit here. In my profession, we work with several schools. So I'm very familiar with the cost of rebuilding and building. So my question is, and maybe to save time, this is something that I can speak with someone from Performance Services. On scenario 8, a 5 through 8 new middle school for $74 million. And correct me if I'm wrong, 4 years ago, it was just under 40? 38, okay. So obviously, everything's gone up, we get that, but I did 3 cost estimators on the current high school, 217,000 square foot, and I came up with 56, 58, and $60 million to completely rebuild that building if it were a total loss. So I'm curious, this is a 2-part question. I'm curious, what size building are we looking at for $74 million? And if that is the case, is the school board going to get other proposals, other estimates? I would just like to see, I know we're comparing similar to Avon, but this is a little different. So I would like to see more information on the cost of the new builds.
Again, it's hypothetical, right? So there's not a building solution. We have no idea what the site investment will be between design. So you can only use historical rates. So I'm using a project as an example as to build these costs, but they are real costs. And it's based on about, I believe, it's 150,000 square feet of building. So each one of those is based on a program, an established program. And you have to be careful when you look at costs, because you gotta know what's included in costs. So, are you talking about design fees? Are you talking about hard construction costs? What are all the values that are included? These costs include design, because we're design builders, and design is included along with construction costs.
Yeah, go ahead, David.
I just on the second part, in the event that we make a decision, will this be bid out by the administration, or are we going to get it? Okay.
Okay, so we talked last time, I just need a refresher. So the bonds come up again in 2 years, is that right? I'm wondering, when does the bond drop off that we can renew, but then how soon can a referendum be against you? I know we talked about that before, but I can't remember the time frame.
So, Carrie, correct me if I'm wrong, the bonding capacity is available next year, meaning 2025. The figure that we gave you was that. As far as a referendum, there is no election next year in 2025. So the earliest that we would be looking, unless we wanted to pay to open the polls, that the school system would have to do that. That's something that could be talked about, but I have a low appetite for that because, I don't like people have to come out just for one thing to vote. So 2026 would be the first time you'd be looking at that. I mean, we can do it anytime if we wanted to. If I remember right, a failed referendum can be put back on the ballot for 2 years, but we're way past 2 years since 2019. So otherwise, I don't think we have any restrictions on when we put it on. There is also legislation going around about it having to be in a what they call it, high volume election, which 2026 midterms would be that. 2027 municipal would, I think, if that passes. Yes, sir.
For the new building costs, that you have up there, just as examples, do those include the infrastructure that would be needed from the town, as far as sewer, water, everything to the existing ground that we already own? And who would pay for that? Would the county or city split that money with us, with the school system, or would the school system be responsible for it all?
So the short answer is we don't know, because we haven't talked to the town, we haven't done any investigation on utilities. But the historical data that I used did include a substantial amount of road reconstruction. Actually, the Avon project I'm talking about, they were required to build a traffic circle in one of the intersections next to the site. So the site development costs were pretty extensive. Typically, what ends up happening when you build when you do develop a site is your utility is required to extend utility across the frontage of the property. For the Avon project, we're required to extend gas, water, and sewer across the property. Those costs were included. The utilities, sanitary district, there wasn't sanitary sewer service immediately available, but they ran a quarter mile of sanitary sewer to get to the site. But we were responsible really for developing about a half a mile length of sanitary sewer across the frontage of the property. So there's extensive, and I would anticipate in a new development that you would have similar requirements, but we don't know. So typically when you estimate hypotheticals early on, I tell you we want to shoot high because we don't want to under project costs. We want to be able to project over what we think, not knowing things, so that you can work within a value. And remember, these costs, I know there's a lot of concern here about costs, right? You're talking about real projects that you have analyzed. This is not a real project. There are no designs to evaluate. This is based on a design somewhere else. And that design may not apply to Washington Community School Corporation. But what it does do, and the purpose of the cost analysis exercise really is twofold. It's to put some perspective in what is the investment in a new facility or a substantial addition, so you can understand the bond capacity that you have, how to look at that, how much building you think you're going to actually be able to achieve within that and be able to balance that. I mean, that's how the last scenario 5E that we looked at was thinking about, okay, we probably can only do a substantial project, we're talking about the district, in one location, and then elements, scattered across the district. So what's the best fit? So we wanted to look at, what if it's a substantial project at the high school? What if it's a substantial project at the primary school? And that's really the purpose of this, is to frame, having some idea of what investments would be able to frame comparisons of what your investments doing different levels of renovation and building would be across the district. Eventually, you'll land on a decision and you will be able to develop, if we're selected as a company to develop a project, we will be able to develop real estimates that will be able to target specific investments. In fact, we've done some of that analysis from an infrastructure standpoint of what your investments would be for rebuilding some of the infrastructure in your existing buildings. Because not only do you need to address student capacity, grade configuration, safety, and security, but you have some aging infrastructure as well that needs to be evaluated and addressed as it can be along with this project. And so when we go into a facility and start looking at improvements, we'll make recommendations on these are the have-tos, you should address these with any type of addition project. And these are the things that you might be able to add and replace or improve upon incrementally down the road. And so that you have a shopping list basically to determine what's best for the district with a prioritization of these. And so look at, as you start thinking about the configurations, the scenarios, frame it with an understanding what cost commitment is, but don't take that as the gospel. That's the definite cost of the rebuild, because we haven't done that analysis yet to know for sure. It just gives you some perspective on the comparisons from building to building.
In which scenario would you estimate there is a case where we would not be at capacity when the scenario is complete?
So there are certain scenarios, if you're talking about which school buildings, which are we addressing capacity on in the best way. I think any scenario that takes a grade level out of the intermediate school is a good scenario, because that one is actually your worst offender of the district. So I would say, and I don't have the number, I just right offhand, but to know which ones, we're probably looking at combinations of scenarios, honestly. But reducing a grade level at the intermediate school would improve that facility. And if you're trying to focus your efforts on improvements at a single facility, if you move students from the intermediate school to the primary school and provide an addition, that probably is a good thing for the district, because it addresses capacity in two different levels.
I guess my point was, there's not a lot of fluff, there's not extra space. We're replacing, like shuffling things around, and we're still going to be accurate.
I think you could be near capacity in some of your facilities, but you would address it adequately in others. So it kind of depends on what combination of scenarios, what combinations of improvements are determined to be the best fit.
In looking at bonding versus referendum, so you're saying we can't mix them at all in this scenario. Do we have a choice then? Can we afford to forfeit bond money? We can't afford to do that. So do we really have a choice but to use bond money and not do a referendum? Does that make sense?
I know what you're trying to say, and yes, so
If you go over the limit, you're forfeiting the bond money to go into a referendum to fund all of it, because there's no mixing.
you're rolling the dice.
Okay.
Exactly. If we're just gonna go for a referendum to do something, anything above 27 million, then yes, unless we go ahead and build something for 27 million. Otherwise, we risk losing that.
So it truly is one or the other.
I agree 100%. I will also add that even if we went that and decided not to use the bonding capacity, and essentially our tax rate that we currently have goes away and is replaced with referendum dollars, that tax rate doesn't really go away. Everybody in the city of Washington is at their tax cap, right? So Washington Community Schools no longer gets that 27 cents or whatever it is, but the city of Washington will. So nobody's taxes are gonna go down if Washington Community Schools tax rate goes down. Does that make sense?
So have we looked at a longer term plan to where we break this up more? Use your bond money now, go out 5-10 years, maybe look at a smaller referendum that's doable, and then break the bank. Have we looked at, in a long-term plan on even the feasibility of the layout of the school to where you get to two campuses, like what do the additions look like in 25 years so we can add on, have 5 grade levels at Griffith or, primary, but get that to 6 grade levels if that's what we choose to do. like long-term, let's look 30 years type scenario, both funding and structural?
The answer is yes. I mean, I guess my answer is yes, because if you look at what's on this page, it's an attempt to get started down that path.
Yeah.
I think a good way to look at it also, we don't want to make a decision today that ties the hands of the school board that decides what to do on the next project. We don't know if that's going to be us or it's going to be somebody else. A failed referendum could mean that it's the school board 20 years from now that decides. So, yes, I mean, we're looking at what the stages could be. What can we do with the money we have? Trying to find a small referendum compared to the last one, trying to, we're not looking for any fluff, anything extravagant, but yeah, I mean, you're hitting on what I hope would come from this of,
Do we go ahead and because we're heading that direction and that's kind of the idea, but do we go ahead and do a layout plan more than what is here? This is kind of step one in the 5-year plan, but do we go ahead and lay out a plan of what it could be? And I realize costs will go up, everything goes up as the years go on. But lay out a longer vision and then start breaking that up.
Yeah.
Imagine it with bonds and possible referendums and all of that.
Yeah, I think that's what all of us want. And that's why I kind of said, as Jerry was presenting some of those scenarios, when you're looking at that, think about what step 2 is and what step 3 is. We're trying to decide what step 1 is. So, even though some of those may look a little weird and go, man, you're going to move the 7th and 8th down the hill there to the junior high. Yeah, but think about where they're going to be on the next project. That may be the Band-Aid, so to say, to get to the next step. So that's part of the reason for all the different scenarios. But I mean, it's a very good question, and I really appreciate this. That's what we're trying to get at here, is a long-term vision. Thank you, Carol.
Well, excuse me, number one, I can't imagine the pressure that the school board administration is under. And I know several years ago, the last school board presented something that didn't go through. We cannot do this any longer. Our children and our teachers are put to the very limit of having the classes full to capacity. We went through a building, we had a wonderful art room that had to be torn up into classrooms. Everything is important. Art is important, band is important, robotics is important, English is important. We cannot put this off any longer. We have to go forward. If we look at other schools around us, they are building, we are not. And we have to go forward. I'm sorry that you all are in that line. I will back you every minute. We have to go forward. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Regardless of what scenario you choose, what is your expected time frame to complete that particular scenario?
As quickly as possible. I know that sounds like a generic answer, but I know where your husband works, and that's why we want to look at this. Is this is what we're doing. Let's get it done. We don't want to just make a decision without community input. That's why we've been at the table here as long as we have. We haven't wasted time as far as those bonds were available and we just weren't doing anything with them. But the time is now. So, as quickly as these guys can get a design, once we tell them what we want to see, and things can be bid. I don't see any reason we couldn't.
So you, laid out the long-term vision, at the top of the scenarios, and only one of those scenarios met the long-term vision that you had set forth. So are you going to have to present more scenarios that do reach your long-term vision, or will you adjust your long-term vision in order to fit a scenario that doesn't currently fit that vision? And will that open up more options?
So I understand what you're saying, and I guess what I'm gonna turn that around to is you know our bonding capacity and what we can do. So, we have to make a first step somewhere. We hope that first step sets up a pathway to meet our long-term vision, but I don't think we have the capacity to do any project today that's gonna meet that long-term vision in every facility.
I think, in order to achieve our long-term vision, it can't be done without a referendum. So, and that's, I think, black and white. We can do a small project that doesn't, really, it can get us moving towards that, but we can't achieve a two-campus configuration by waiting 20 more years for this $25 million bond to come on. So that doesn't work. I have a question for performance services. I think us as a board, I think our next step is to try to narrow this down to a few scenarios. I'm having a hard time possibly trying to do that when we don't know, we have these high level costs. And there are certain scenarios here with a high level cost that I think that's not going to fly, in my opinion. So how can you help us to narrow down the scenarios that our community will possibly support? Because again, without knowing, how do we get to know more exact figures to know what our community will support? Because some of these, I think, are non-starters.
Yeah, we like to start by framing the program requirements. So I always like to look at district configuration components first. And so as we've been talking about this as a stepped approach towards being able to achieve a long-term vision, as I stated to start with, could be a 5-year vision, it could be a 10-year vision, it could be a 25-year vision. But knowing that your facilities, parts of them have substantial age. The original gym at the high school, for instance, is 1920-ish. You have a number of portions of buildings that are 1950s. And so the way I would evaluate it is, what is your preferred configuration? Do you want to try to maintain a high school campus with 7 through 12 in a building? So if you're senior high school, if you want to maintain that as your configuration, its desired approach, you know what your solution for that building would be. Your solution would be to expand programming opportunities by some sort of an addition at some point in time on this project or a future project. So that then sets the table. Then you can look at your other facilities and say, we're not going to move 7th and 8th grade out of that facility. We're going to retain them in that facility. So think of it in terms of programming organization. And that will narrow your focus then, and then you can start to look at cost parameters for those elements and try to define it into elements of scope based on program priorities. That's how I would approach it. And we could help, we'd be happy to help you, continue to look at that process.
Project we're going to move forward, that we need to
have the high school stand alone. I think that junior high has to come out of that building and give that entire building to the high school. To tear down the existing junior high gym and build a new facility there, I think it's a long way to go, and leave it 7 through 8 or 7 through 12. Those projects, with any scenario, we need to have that junior high out of there. And if the problem I have with some of our scenarios is, like the primary school becoming a pre-K through 3. I mean, I have a grandson that's getting dropped off there in the morning. Mrs. Murphy's out there shuffling kids out of cars, and we got 400 kids there now. How's that gonna live with 800 kids at that site? I don't, I think that's one of our options. And I like the option of putting the 7th and 8th grade here at the intermediate, just because of the gymnasium and the track and the tennis courts, access to the soccer fields. Leaving the 7th and 8th grade at the high school is not an option for me. I think that needs to definitely be out there. And I agree with Jason. I think some of these are, like the new 7th and 8th grade building is $48 million. And 5 through 8 is $74 million. 5 years ago, it was $38 million, with a 4-level building there and a football field and a field house with 3 gyms in it. And all the infrastructure done in 5 short years. That is more than double, and you're getting less for your dollar. So the longer we wait, Errol, right, the longer we wait, the more expensive it becomes. But if we do like a 2A scenario, $33 million, and then our long range is push for a referendum to build maybe a new 5th and 6th grade or 7th and 8th grade. And if that happens, great. But if it doesn't, then we solve at least some of our problems in the long term.
Yeah, I think your discussion there with what you said is exactly what the kind of conversation that needs to take place. You can focus your efforts and gain consensus on what you think the best approaches would be.
Yeah, I think building a new middle school out there is out of question in today's market. It ties our hands and it ties the future of this corporation for the next 30 years. And we've proven that community won't support it. And I'm going to address the guy's comment about abatements. Abatements are kind of a double-edged sword. As far as not giving abatements, then you lose that opportunity to draw people to this community. If you can give an abatement and somebody creates 50 jobs here, then you're getting your money through property tax for new homes and people spending money and rolling over in this community. So abatements are something that has to be part of the community and for the county council, or else we will never have any industry here.
I did not say I was strictly against abatements. I simply asked if anyone on the school board conversed with anyone on the county council or the county commissioners about said abatements and how much money that was taken out of schools. There are several abatements that this county has given out that did not provide the 50 jobs you're talking about. I know one provided 3. I applied for one and got turned down. So, I mean, there's just different things. I'm just talking about communication between you all, between your board and between the commissioners and the council. I mean, I'm not opposed to everything.
I'm just saying it's
I'm not gonna say that I am.
necessary.
I just think everybody should be taking their fair share as we go along. It should not be land on the hands of the landowners out here and the businesses that do not get that stuff, is what I'm saying. But I'm a landowner, and if you've got an IRA, I'm sure, or 401k or whatever. Let's take $2,700 out of your 401k the next 10 years and give them to the school. Because that's basically what's happening to me on my property taxes right now. My land is my retirement, just as your 401k is your retirement. And people need to realize that, is all I'm saying. I'm not against abatements, I'm for, I understand we have to have some. So I'm just here to say, let's try to find a way to make everybody pay their fair share. I'm not opposed to the new school. I was opposed to the last proposal, because they never even had a long term. I asked a school board, what's the 5 to 10 and the 20-year plan? He looked at me and said, we don't have one. I'm real glad I talked to a school board member here at Clinton a week or 2 ago, and he said, yes, we do have a plan. We're looking forward. We want some of that. I think you're going on the right path. I think you just need to, I think a meeting like this is very good to get input and stuff. But I'm not against total abatements. I'm just saying, let's get everybody to take their fair share.
When the referendum failed 5 years ago, we had the quote for all the fluff for 38 million. Was performance services involved in?
No. That wasn't a
Are we
design.
in contact with who was?
Are you talking about Fair Green, that and
Yes.
that's all I know.
The quote that we had back then, Quentin, and I obviously was not on the board at that time, but it was not a design build. The quote that you're seeing up here is a design build. As Jerry said, that includes the design costs and other things like that. But that was with a company that didn't do things that way. So part of what you look at when you're looking at design build is when these guys give us a figure, and not the figures we got now, when a figure off of an actual plan, that's gonna be our cap of what we're gonna spend. We're not gonna get a change order because the ground was soft here, or whatever. They're gonna do all their due diligence to get us a hard cost that it's gonna cost us. If it comes in less, I think that expands maybe what we can do, but, so it's really hard to compare those two things, the 2019 thing and what's going on with this thing. Does that make sense? Does that answer the question you have, I guess? And I did look at, just because Jerry mentioned 150,000 square feet, the original referendum was 144,421 square feet, something real close to that. That's what they had put out.
So it sounds like we've heard a lot of different views, but it sounds like everybody is understanding that a new build is really, regardless of if it's a elementary stop, or middle school, but that is kind of the number one thing that puts us in a better position for our long-term goal. I think, I guess my question is, what do we do from here, and how do we get that hard cost? I think that's, what I was hoping to see is it's a very close, what it would cost, maybe what we have 5 years ago, what would that right there cost today? And I understand it's kind of hard because of the design build and all that, but how do we take that and say, here's what it would cost? So how do we move forward with that? Maybe I didn't ask that right, but.
So I think one of the things that we wanted to come from tonight, or at least I did personally, is for the community here to see these numbers for new buildings and what is the appetite of the community. If the community wouldn't approve a $38 million referendum, is there any need to even talk about what was it, 55 million or 48, you know, do we realize now we need that? So that's something that as a board, we should put out there and we think we can accomplish, or is there any need to even go down that path? I mean, you know, I don't know how many different scenarios these guys are willing to put real hard costs to. I'm not gonna speak for them. We can ask, you know, and if they're not willing, we can ask somebody else if that becomes a thing. But so I guess the way I would turn that around to you, AJ, is if we can come back and bring you a 5 through 8 for 55 million, you think we should put it on the ballot? Okay, that's.
And the reason I say that is, you know, we moved here 5 years ago, right during in June of that year. And obviously, we were very cognitive of what direction this was gonna go in. And, you know, I don't, like I said, we got here in June, so I'm not very familiar with the process that led up to that, but I know what you guys and the school board have done now, and educating us with these binders and going through each facility and talking to numerous staff members. And I think it's safe to say a lot of people that were against the referendum 5 years ago probably would think a little bit differently about that now. You know, like they said, taxes never go down. In Vincennes, for half an acre, I pay $1,200 a year for half an acre. I don't even pay close to that here now. And like you said earlier, we're at the bottom of the state on what we pay. So I think because we have been educated as a community a lot more and brought to, you know, 62 of us brought in what we saw, I think it would go a lot differently. Yeah. Okay.
These scenarios, how are you guys gonna whittle those down? And are you gonna bring back to the community to say, hey, these are the ones that we like? You know, is there gonna be a la carte on these, or, you know, pick and choose and get to a consensus on what we're gonna do? You know?
Yeah, I think we need to keep moving forward, and we need to narrow in on maybe two scenarios. You know, keeping the focus on, like what Carol said, we have to have a plan. In 2019, we didn't have a backup plan. So here we are, 2024. So we have to have a plan to do something. And then maybe we'll settle in, and if the appetite's there for us to put a bigger plan and have here's plan scenario A and here's scenario B, we'll come back to the table here in a month or two and I think put them out there. And, you know, those of you that are here, let's see if we can double the room, because I think that's me. My thing is, that was a tremendous amount of energy and emotion that went into that process. And so if we're gonna go down that road again, I wanna have some level of confidence that there's a better chance. You know, the 60% of the community said no pretty loudly to us in 2019. So I mean, we have to figure out, the 7 board members, myself, the other administrators, my office staff, that is a huge undertaking. So I mean, I'm sitting here thinking we need to come up with what's realistic that we can do with our bonding capacity. Let's really narrow in on what we think is the best use of that money. That kind of is the first step towards a long-range vision. It's not going to get us done in one step. It's going to take many years. Or maybe there's a project idea there. I'll be honest, as a superintendent, and I'm looking at my elementary principals there, I really feel like a solution needs to impact K-4, because a new middle school doesn't really give us much flexibility with what we're going to do with Beal, and primary and intermediates is the two buildings we're building, walls. And we're having, our local contractor come in and put walls in these buildings. So I don't know if the new middle school is the answer, because it doesn't really help us with K-4, and then it doesn't help us if we're gonna stretch it out and just have, one grade in the upper and 2 grades here. I don't know, that's some of what we need to work through on what's really gonna be the biggest impact and the best use of these funds that we're gonna have available.
Okay, I agree with Mr. Bushy. I like the 2A the best, just my personal opinion. I think pretty well everybody in here knows I was a big no on the last referendum. I would support a referendum, but I think anybody's delusional to think that we could go ask for another 20 million and get it to pass. I think my personal feeling, we need to pick one of the smaller ones, build it with, do what we can with our bonds, and then in a few years, try and do a smaller referendum. I just don't think, on the last referendum, you won one precinct, and I don't remember the precinct numbers in Washington, but it was the Green Acres precinct. And if I remember right, you won it by less than 10 votes. So that's going to be a lot to swing to try and go to a big referendum.
I'm gonna go more that route. I agree with a lot of what Frank said, and I agree that I think we should think about this in terms of 2 projects. Dusty kind of touched on this. What can we do for the $25 to $27 million right now? And then I agree a lot of what AJ said. I think obviously, we gotta have to look at a larger investment on a referendum, but a smaller referendum at a later date may make most sense in that way. So I think in terms of what I would like to see is, maybe 2 or 3 options that hammer down closer on the numbers within that 27 million. And I know details got to get worked out on what makes a lot of sense, but I agree. We got to provide support I'm a secondary person. I work with the secondary buildings. We need support at our K-4 buildings more than anything. I mean, I really do think that. I've got a kindergartner. We need to get those class sizes down. Not that I don't think secondary programming is important. I really do. I've been in it all my life, but we got to get K-4 rights with space issues. And that'll flow uphill and allow us to have some of those programs like behavioral rooms and things like that we know we've had success with and help all the way up. So that's what I'd like to see in terms of options, 2 or 3 options, really focusing on what can we do with our 27 million now, but also I'd like to see an option for, okay, what would the next thing look like? I think putting that in front of people, it's like, all right, so if we got 27 million, we're going to do an expansion of primary for that amount. Okay, well, here's also the option in 5 or 10 years, what we think might look like a good thing for a referendum at that point. That makes sense.
Last thing. So what I see is we've got a big need that we're struggling to come up with a solution to pay for and stretch 20 years. We got bonding that's roughly every 20 years. What if we did a referendum in between so you had money coming in every 10? That, to me, is something the community would support. So you had a $25 million coming in on the off 10 years. And every 10 years, you knew you were going to do something between referendum and bonds. And they rotated through, which would fill that gap financially. And you could get to the point we want to get to in 20, 30 years, rather than bonding out or the future referendum. Does that make sense? So you would constantly have a flow of money coming in every 10 years. And it's going to take 5 years to start thinking through the next project so it would keep that flow of additions, remodeling, upkeep on buildings more frequent. And we would stay more up to date probably every 20 years, so something major.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, Dusty, and that's something that as a board, I think we have to talk about. We want to do that. What we're talking about doing now doesn't affect the tax rate at all. So there's no impact to the taxpayer, whatever happens now, whether the next thing happens in 5 years or 10 years. I understand you're spreading out the construction, but who's to say we don't look at doing something in 5 years smaller, and then another something in 10 years smaller, or 5 years? So that's one of the things that this board's gonna have to decide, what they wanna try to get accomplished, and what we think, we hope the community will support. Yes, sir.
Are referendums just for new builds, or could you do, if you use all the bond money with one of the projects, could you come back for a smaller amount to do a renovation and have a referendum for that renovation? Or is it new build only?
I don't think it's new build only. I think it's limited to a project.
Right.
And if that project could be renovation to 4 buildings, I don't know, we'd have to get some clarity from some people that speak legalese on that. Yes, sir.
Kind of touching on what Dusty talked about, if you would come back, say, in 10 years and do a referendum then of like at 20 or 25 million, is it still the case that if you do the referendum, you don't have to do, when that gets ready to roll off, you can do construction without the referendum again? Basically, if you did 25 million, when that 25 million comes off, as long as you're going construction again, your tax rate will stay. You don't have to redo your referendum, do you? I know if it's an operating referendum like Marie runs, they have to, but I believe in construction, you don't. But that could have changed over the years.
That wasn't my understanding, but
I think it takes.
Very simple. You have to referendum in any project. That doesn't get built into our tax base. Just like the operating deal does.
Right. And what Marie does is operating, I think. It's
Right.
But it's operating versus.
Right, I thought there was a difference in the way it worked.
So in just a few short years, we saw 38 million up to 65 million. 10 years from now, 25 million will be nothing. Like, I mean, 25 million today sounds great, but 25 million 10 years from now has not the same value at all.
Sorry, it wasn't a question, sorry.
Hey, I don't need a question every time. And I agree with you. I hope inflation doesn't continue at the rate that it has continued at, but it will. Okay, well, I think out of respect for everybody's time, we've been here a little over 2 hours on this deal. I want to say thank you to everyone who has spoke tonight and shared your opinions. As a board, we're going to take that into consideration, start focusing in on what we want to see some more costs from these guys, and hopefully be back in front of you with some things to present and move towards a decision. So with that, I will call this meeting adjourned.
Today, learned, man, time and a half.